Hey everybody, welcome to Seaside Quilting Supplies. This is the beginning of a series called Back to Basics with Barb. My name is Barb and I own Seaside Quilting Supplies, so we're glad to have you join us today. We're going to start a little series based on a 3-yard quilt pattern, and everybody knows 3-yard quilts are all the rage right now. They're a great way to make a handmade gift super quick, with personal touches that really make gift giving special. So we're going to work on this little Christmas forest quilt from Fabric Cafe. Donna Robertson and her friends there designed these great 3-yard patterns. And we're going to start with the very beginning basics of planning a quilt. So the first thing we're going to talk about is some color choice and how to think outside the box when you're making a quilt. So a lot of us, even experienced sewists, sometimes get stuck in the rut of you get a pattern and you think, wow, I really need to get the fabrics that look close to that. I don't want to, don't want to venture too far away. But that really limits what you can do with a pattern. And we all pay good money for our patterns. So I wanted to help you guys understand that changing the fabrics in a quilt can completely change the look of the quilt. So rather than ending up with a pattern that you think, oh, I'm not going to make that again, it'll look just like the other one, change your fabrics up and watch how different the quilts can look. So you'll get a lot more bang for your buck out of your quilt patterns that way. So obviously our shop name is Seaside Quilting Supplies. So I decided I'm going to make my little Christmas quilt out of beach fabrics. I know lots of beach lovers. I know lots of people who live at the beach and they decorate with a beach theme for Christmas even. So we're going to do some beach theme fabrics and turn them into these cute little Christmas trees for a beach lover's Christmas tree quilt. So first things first, these little patterns are literally what they say. 3-yard patterns. You need 1 yard of each of 3 fabrics. What you need in those 3 fabrics is a contrast, sort of a focal, and a good background fabric. So I'm going to show you the ones I chose that we're going to talk about. So you want something with a scale. By scale, I mean the size of the items or the images on the fabric. So you want a scale that's going to fit. This is obviously not a huge quilt. In fact, let me tell you what this quilt finishes at. This cute little quilt finishes at 43 by 59. Now, of course, you could enlarge it by adding extra borders or even making extra rows of trees. But we're going to make it as it's written. So it finishes 43 by 59. So it's not a huge quilt. So therefore, the trees are going to have, there we go. The trees need to be like a medium scale. You could not go with something really huge because these are pieced. So you need a scale that's going to be represented well in the size of the blocks you're making. So I chose 2 fabrics with a small to medium scale. They're not tiny scale. They're small-ish in some spots, more medium-ish in others. Here's what I chose. The fabrics are hanging on my Gypsy Quilter design wall right now just for you guys to see. So this is going to be my background fabric, and I'm going to bring it over to the camera in just a minute. But this is a neutral from Northcott called Marshmallow. It's a toasty kind of a cream. This is my background. This is going to be my contrast fabric. It has these great little buoys all over it on this kind of aqua-y background. And this is going to be my... it's not really going to be my focal, but it is the first fabric I started with. So I picked a fabric that I loved, and then I chose my other fabrics to coordinate with this. So this will be, this fabric and this fabric will be, let me flip this around, the alternating trees on the pattern. And then the tan will be the background, and then we'll alternate the borders. So I cut 1 yard of each fabric already, and I'm gonna put the fabrics on the table and we're gonna get started cutting. So in just a minute, but I want to just talk to you a little bit more about color. So you want to have your quilt you know, kind of has a tone. Your whole quilt will kind of have a feel to it. So for example, this, you can see these colors are sort of muted. They're not loud or bossy. I like to call really loud, vibrant colors bossy because they will take over a whole quilt, and your quilt will feel loud and bossy. Not that there's anything wrong with that. If that's your goal for your project, then that's what you want, is for your colors to have a strong voice. These are kind of muted and soft, and I knew that going in. I knew I want my trees to stand out, but I also want the feel of the quilt to be soft like the beach. It's kind of soft and sandy like the beach, which is why I picked this great sandy color as my background. So remember to think about overall feel of the quilt, tone. So you don't want to put like, I mean, look, I'm the last person to tell you what to and not to put in your quilts, but because I'm not big on the quilt police. I really don't like them at all. Put whatever you want in your quilt, and whoever you give it to will love it, I'm sure. However, you do want your quilt to make a little bit of sense. So for example, in this muted soft quilt, I would not put, let me grab something that I would not put in there. I wouldn't put this. I wouldn't put this loud, vibrant pink in there thinking it needed a pop of color, because it doesn't just give it a pop of color, it utterly distracts from the feel of the quilt. So I hope I've conveyed to you what I mean by tone and feeling of each fabric, because that was my goal, to help you guys understand that. And the scale, keep your eye on the scale. You wouldn't want, since these are fairly small trees, you wouldn't want, for example, a crab or a shell that's this big, because when you cut the fabric up, you're going to lose the integrity of that shell, and you may not even be able to tell it's a shell in your project. So we have to think about scale a little bit, depending on your block size, and you have to think about whether your quilt feels kind of balanced. So you don't want all your fabrics to be too close to each other in color either. Let me show you what I mean by that. Let's grab like, so we wouldn't want, we don't want to add a bunch of tans to this. You need a nice background and then two fairly contrasty colors. You just don't, otherwise your quilt gets muddy. And by muddy, I mean, it will lose its definition. It will lose its pop that it has, like its little trees might not pop the way they should off the fabric. So that's our goal for today, is to understand color and scale and balance in your quilt, and to get an overall feel for your project. So I hope that was helpful, and I'll be back as I start cutting. Hey everybody, welcome back to Basics with Barb, as we begin to work on our Christmas forest quilt. We're going to start, you guys, at the very, very beginning. In fact, we're going to start with squaring up our first piece of fabric so that we can have a nice clean cut for our strips, the pieces we need to cut down to. So I'm going to point the camera down. You'll be able to hear me talking, but you won't see my face as I'm going to talk you through this. And listen, everybody does their own thing. Everybody has their own techniques for how they square up the end of their fabric and what they do next. And that's fine. Y'all do it however you want to do it. I'm going to show you how I do it because it's how it works best for me, including my 1 yard cuts are folded in half. And I know some of y'all are going to get all twisted up about that fold. I'm not going to, because I've never had any trouble with it. So it's folded. I know it. Don't tell me it's folded. I already get that. Okay, so I'm going to point the camera down and we're going to get started cutting. So what we need is 3 1 yard cuts of fabric, and we talked briefly about that earlier, about choosing the fabrics. So now we're going to start cutting them down, and this is going to be called fabric 1 on our pattern, and our pattern is the cute little Christmas forest from Fabric Cafe. So fabric 1 is, you'll see it in just a second. I'm going to turn the camera down here a little bit so that you guys can see me while I'm cutting. So, hang on. Silly camera thing is very disagreeable. Hang on a minute. All right, so here we are. Here's our piece of fabric. I have it folded in half. You can see it, you know, this is the rough end that's been on the bolt. So I want to clean this up before I ever start. So this is the whole width of the fabric. This is the selvage. This is the fold. This is the selvage. I fold mine in half. I know people don't like that. That's just fine. You're free to not like that. Then I want to get a clean, straight angle to start cutting my strips on. So I'm going to line my fabric up on a line on my cutting mat. Now, I'm not really going to count on that line for measuring because I don't generally. I use my ruler, but it does give me a straight line across the bottom. Okay, so I'm on a line. I've got my ruler. I'm going to pick a perpendicular line over here, a little bit in, as close in as I can so I don't waste much fabric. And I'm going to pick a line on my ruler. I hope you guys can see this. It's hard for me to tell if you can see this or not. I'm going to pick a line on my ruler that's going to be perpendicular to the line on my fabric. I'm going to line it up, the edge of my ruler, with lines on my mat. So I have a 90-degree angle here, and I'm going to trim off this little bit of untidy end here before I start cutting. So spider fingers on your ruler, nice clean sharp blade. Take off just this teeny little bit. Okay, so now I have a good 90-degree angle right here for starting to cut down my fabric with. Now, I'm right-handed. I can't cut my strips from this side, so I flipped my fabric. I'm going to get myself a nice, and yes, I know I've moved it, but I still have a good, I want to be sure I'm in the camera here for you. Hang on a second. All right, so here we are in the camera. I still have a nice clean edge. I moved it very gently. I've got my fabric lined up on a vertical line and a horizontal line. So I'm nice and straight there. And my first cut says to cut 2 8-inch by width of fabric strips. So I do not measure 2 inches on my mat. Some people, I know people do that. I do not do that. Mats vary sometimes by, sometimes by small amounts, sometimes by more serious amounts that may impact how your strips and your blocks come out. So I keep my measurements on my ruler and use the same ruler. So you guys are going to want to use the same ruler now. Whatever ruler you start with, stick with that ruler for your whole project. That way you are not incorporating what may be slightly different measurements on different rulers into your project, which can throw it off. So my first cut needs to be 8 inches by width of fabric, which means I don't have the right ruler. Hang on, I need a different ruler. Where is my square? All right. Ah! Hang on, let's see what I've got on this ruler. Okay. So I've got my Creative Grids ruler here, and I need an 8-inch strip, and that's how wide this ruler is. So I'm going to find a horizontal line on my ruler. I'm going to put it on the fold of my fabric. I'm going to line up the left edge. So now I have my fold of my fabric on a horizontal line. I have my left edge exactly lined up with the edge of my fabric that I just cut. This is an 8-inch ruler, so I can just make one cut right here. All right, there's one of my 8-inch cuts. I need 2 of those. By width of fabric means the full width of the fabric that you bought. So this should be 44 inches. And I need 1 more of those. So again, I'm going to line my ruler up, left edge of the ruler with the left edge of the fabric that I just cut, fold on a horizontal line. It doesn't matter which line you pick because it just needs to be a straight line. You just need to know you have a good right angle here. Okay, so I'm going to cut my second. All right, that's my second. So I needed 2 8-inch by width of fabric strips. Okay, now we need to subcut. And I'll be right back. I do like to press these nice and flat when I start subcutting, so I'll be right back. Okay, we're back. So I ran over and gave them a little press, not an iron, a press, and we'll talk about that soon, with a little bit of best press on them just to give it a nice, flat, smooth finish. And we're going to cut 8 5 by 8 inch rectangles. So my strip is 8 inches wide. My strip is 8 inches wide. So we're going to cut 5. We're going to cut 4. Nope, forget that. Okay, I'm back. I went over and hit my fabric with a little best press, gave it a little press, make sure it's nice and smooth and flat. And now we need to cut 8 5 by 8 inch rectangles. So here we have our strip. It's 8 inches by width of fabric. So we're going to line up one of our long edges on a line on our mat. I want to make sure it's nice and straight. And, well, I'm going to show you one little thing that I always like to check. So I'm going to move this over and get this out of the way a little bit so you guys can see this. Okay, so here's my strip vertically on my mat. I'm going to line the fold up with a line on my mat. And I'm going to line my left edge up so that I know that one side is nice and tidy. And I want to make sure that I do in fact have an 8 inch wide, and I do. So I just like to do that and check it, make sure I don't need to trim anything off a little bit. Okay, so now we need to cut 8 5 by 8 inch squares. So I'm going to line this up. And this end, oh, let me move down here. So this edge has the fold, you guys. So of course we need to trim the fold off. So we'll put our fold just a little bit over the line so that we can trim that off in just a minute. So now we need a 5 inch piece. This is a 6 inch wide ruler. So I'm going to take the 5 inch mark. I'm going to put it on the fold, knowing that I put it a little bit over a vertical line so that I can trim the fold off. So now I have a 5 by 8 inch under my ruler. I'm going to line up a horizontal line on my ruler with the long side of my fabric. I'm going to line the left edge up with the left edge of 5 on my ruler, and I'm going to make my first cut. Oops, make that a little straighter there. Okay, so you want to make sure you're on a good straight line with your 5 vertical line on your ruler on a vertical line on your mat, so you know you're straight. Okay, so I know I'm straight, and I'm going to make my cut. Now, you'll recall that I said the fold is under here, and I cut a little bit larger than I needed. So now I'm going to flip this around. I'm going to line it up on a vertical line and a horizontal line. I'm going to put the 5 back down on here. I'm going to get the horizontal line on my ruler on the horizontal line with my fabric. I'm going to get my left line perfectly lined up. And there's just the teeniest little bit of fold that I'm going to cut off here. Spider fingers with downward pressure with your ruler, a nice firm downward pressure with your rotary cutter. And this is all we lost of the fold. So now we have two 5 by 8 inch rectangles. Now we need 8 of those. So we're going to make the next cut. We're going to make sure we line our fabric up with a vertical line on the mat and a horizontal line on the mat. We're going to make another 5 inch cut. 5 inch line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 inch line on the left and a horizontal line on the bottom. It doesn't matter what line you're on as long as you're nice and horizontal. Okay, so that's 4. Can you guys still see me? You can. That's 6. And this will be 8. So now we have 8 5" by 8". Now we have 5" by 8" rectangles. All right, from our second strip, so that was our first strip. This is our second strip. From our second strip, we're going to cut From our second strip, we're going to cut 4 rectangles. Now, I just realized I'm telling you guys exact measurements. I'm not supposed to do that unless you have the pattern. You're going to cut 4 5 by 8" rectangles. All right, so we need 4. We need 4 more. So again, you got a little too far that way. Again, I'm going to put my fold a little bit across the line I've chosen so that I can cut the fold off in a minute. And we need 4 more 5 by 8". So I'm going to line my ruler up with a 5" mark. So this is my edge of the ruler, 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, 5 inch. This is 5 inches on the ruler right here. I'm going to pick a horizontal line and a vertical line. I'm going to use my ruler to measure, not my mat. And I'm going to make my first cut. All right, and then I'm going to flip it, and I'm going to cut my little teeny fold off. I'm going to put the ruler again, line up the horizon and the vertical, and take my little fold off here. So that's 2 more rectangles, and then I need 1 more. All right, so that gives me 4 for a total of 12 rectangles. All right, so from the remainder of our strip, we're going to cut, what are we going to cut? We need to cut 2 larger strips. So, all right, anyway, before we do the next step, let me look at you for a minute. So, all right, so you've been cutting now. Just saw how we cut our smaller units for the quilt, for our blocks. And then we're gonna work on cutting some larger strips out of our remaining piece for our border. So I'll be right back. Okay, on to our next step. So now we need 2 larger pieces subcut from our original piece of fabric. So they need to be, and read your instructions. So we're gonna, I'm one of those bad quilters. I fold my fabric. I can't reach all the way across. I don't like to. I fold it and I deal with it later. So I need to cut my next 2, I need 2 remaining pieces, and so I'm just going to cut them according to the instructions. Just remember that whatever your instructions call for, you're going to want to, maybe I should show you guys this. Let me do it this way too. Let me show you the way the quilt police would have you do it. So normally you'd have your fabric completely unfolded. I fold mine because I've gotten over that years ago. My fold's on the bottom edge of my ruler. So I need 2 larger cuts now. So I'm going to put my ruler, I'm going to pick a line on my ruler, a nice horizontal line, put it on the fold. I'm going to move my ruler to the correct width that I need for these cuts. And I'm going to make sure that my horizontal line and my vertical line are nice and straight with the edge of my fabrics. And once I'm sure of that, so the thing you'll find, you guys, listen, take your time doing your cutting. It'll save you a world of trouble. So I've got I know I have the right measurements now. I'm going to make this cut. And again, I'm spider fingers on the ruler, downward pressure, and a nice downward pressure on your rotary cutter. Your rotary cutter will cut most of them if you have a good new blade. They're very sharp, but you do have to apply some downward pressure. I mean, they're not magic. You still have to put a little effort into it. Okay, so that's my one strip, and I'm going to cut my other one that I need. Same method, nice right angle. Strip on the fold, a horizon mark on the ruler on the fold. My left side of my fabric will have a vertical line on my ruler. Again, I'm cutting with my ruler. I'm not using my mat to measure. Mats have too much variation in them. They're generally not as precise as your ruler. And remember to use the same ruler all the way through your project. Okay, so I have this all set. And I've cut my second strip. So these are just some, some cutting basics. And you're going to want to follow along with your own pattern if you're doing this. Get your pattern out. Make sure you're cutting according to your measurements. Let me see what else I need to cut out of this. Okay. Your pattern will tell you, I need to subcut these down a little bit more. These should be, okay. These should be, and again, after you've made your width cut, so this had to be a certain width, then you can make your adjustments to whatever length you need. And I'm going to cut, let me get back in the shot here for you guys, and I'm going to cut my little fold off here. Again, I want my ruler to match a horizontal line on my mat and to match a vertical line on my mat so that I know I'm cutting a nice right angle. So my fold is now off of my, and I can continue my subcutting. And I need a certain length here. And again, line your ruler up on the horizontal and on the vertical. Okay, so I have that. I have my rectangles now. I have my long pieces out of fabric 1. And then I need 1.5 inches. So again, get your ruler, line up your fold. I need 1.5 inches strip. Let me get my fabric straight for you guys here. All right, so I'm on a horizontal line, I'm on a clean vertical line, and I need a strip that is a smaller one. So I'm going to set my ruler where it needs to be, and I'm going to make sure I'm lined up on the vertical and the horizontal. You want a nice right angle there, and double check before I cut, I always glance back at my instructions because sometimes I look at the wrong thing. So I always, especially when I'm using a piece of fabric like this one, I don't have much left of. Okay, so I cut that. Then you have to subcut this piece. So I need oh, sorry, I didn't mean to jiggle you. Let me see. And because I was a little short on that piece of fabric, you guys, I'm probably going to have to make my outer border different. So let me see what I have to cut from this. Fabric 3. All right, so I need to cut my fold off. Again, horizontal, vertical, don't forget. Keep that nice and lined up, and it needs to be a certain length. So then I'm going to find a nice spot on the mat to line it up. And I'm going to cut my, okay. So I've cut down my fabric 1. And I need fabric 3. Or 2.5 inches. I'm gonna pause for a minute. I'll be right back. All right, so we're still cutting, you guys, and I'll just tell you that I was in love with this piece of fabric and I wanted to use it in this project, and it was a little bit short, so I knew I was going to have to switch my borders out because I didn't quite have a full yard of this. So I'm cutting my border, my smaller border, out of this one rather than the larger border. So you can see here in the pattern there's a larger border and a smaller border. I'm going to flip those because I didn't have quite enough of fabric 1 to do the outer border. So I'm going to make this the inner border. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my strips out of this, and then we'll be ready to start talking about the next step. Remember to line up your vertical and your horizontal markings on your ruler with the bottom left corner of your fabric so that you're cutting at a nice right angle. That'll give you nice straight strips. And I am still going to be a little bit short. Maybe I'm going to have to maybe piece one of my I may have to piece one of my, let's see, 1, 2, 3 rats. I am probably going to have to piece my last little one. Okay, that's a story for a different day. Okay. So once we're done cutting, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to skip ahead and I'm going to go cut all my fabrics, and I'll be right back and we'll sit down and start talking about putting this quilt together. Hey everybody, welcome to Seaside Quilting Supplies. My name is Barb and I'm the owner of this great little quilt shop. We're so happy you've joined us. Today we're starting a new series called Back to Basics with Barb. We're going to use a fabulous 3-yard quilt pattern called Christmas Forest from the folks at Fabric Cafe. And we're going to go through some basic skill building on making this cute little quilt. The first thing we're going to do is talk about choosing our fabrics and why we choose certain fabrics the way we do. So we're going to start with that. We'll talk a little bit about the pattern itself, but we're going to start with how would you choose your fabrics for this. Now I know for some of you more experienced sewists, it's going to seem like so super basic. But we have lots of great young new sewists, including the amazing, talented Mary Carpenter who works here with me. And for new sewists, it's a real question. Like, how do I know how dark my fabric should be, or how light my fabric should be, or contrast fabric, or whatever that is? So we're going to talk about that first. And we're going to talk about thinking outside of the box for your quilts. So, you know, we all have these great patterns that we love, and sometimes we get stuck using them only for this with the fabrics that are similar to the ones shown in the pictures on the project. So, oh, sorry. So we're going to get